Hi everybody, it's Hero back with another Dragonflight video. And in this video, I'd like to give you a Mythic Plus sub-rogue guide ahead of Season 1. We're going to go through talents, we're going to talk a little bit about rotation, some of the intricacies of the spec, and maybe talk a little bit about UI and setting up things so it's clear for you. So let's get started by taking a look at the talents. I'm mostly going to highlight why I think this is the best approach to begin with. There's some utility options here. And I'll do my best to work through all of the pieces that I think are really relevant for you. I'm going to begin with the most important ones. The most important thing for Mythic Plus is getting your secret techniques and your shadow dance down pat. What do I mean by that? I'll show you some rotation in a minute. Rotationally, what we're trying to do in AoE is build with Shuriken Storm and spend with Black Powder in order to build up stacks for Dance Macabre and large secret techniques explosions in AoE. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that Cold Blood is currently bugged, and we can make use of it not for the beginning of the cast, but for the clones that come out after secret technique gets pressed. So when you press secret technique, you immediately do some damage. There's a short delay, and then 2 shadow clones also do damage. What we can do is we can press secret technique, wait, and then press cold blood. Well, you can press it right after, but you have to make sure that secret technique goes off right away. You can't really macro it. And that means that the cold blood will give crit to the back portion of secret technique, and you won't lose the cold blood buff. So if you wait, it will allow those secret technique clones to crit, and you still have the crit buff that you can use on something else. And that is a really valuable way to amplify your damage in Mythic Plus. So the main gameplay loop is always going to include opening with Shuriken Storm BP in Shadow Dance, Shuriken Storm Ruptures, and then to build up stacks, and then we want to finish with a big secret technique and cold blood. That's the basic gameplay loop to practice. If you want to get good at sub-rogue, that's what you need to do. Now there are a number of other pieces that go into this. The main other piece is Shuriken Tornado, which you don't have to take, but which does offer you a compressed version of this, so you can get a bit more damage out, and I'll show you in the video how to use that properly. There's also things like Thistle Tea, especially when you get into the bosses of a Mythic Plus where your energy regeneration isn't so good. You have Thistle Tea to keep your uptime solid all the way through the boss fights or more single target or cleave encounters where we're not building as many combo points. I recommend taking Cheat Death in Mythic Plus, and I know it takes away from some of our damage potential, but this is such a valuable tool for Rogue. I cannot see how you would ever play a competitive Mythic Plus pushing group without having access to this. It just solves so many problems for your group, for triage healing, for mechanics, all that kind of stuff. Likewise, I think I would recommend Gouge is also a premier button for Mythic Plus. There are many, many, many encounters where you could have kicked another ability if you'd just been able to gouge, because most of the mobs in Trash that are dangerous can be CC'd, and Rogue's toolkit is really geared towards locking down single targets, whether it's through blinds, through kidney shots, through cheap shots, and also through gouge. So please grab this and get used to it. I'd also recommend Tricks of the Trade in general. This isn't absolutely necessary, but it is pretty useful, especially if you're pugging, in ensuring that you're not going to get clapped, because the burst on sub-rogue is pretty high in the opener of any pull. You can see here we haven't taken evasion. I would recommend not taking evasion if you can help it. It is almost entirely irrelevant for Mythic Plus, meaning if you're in a situation where evasion is a good button, that means the tank is probably dead or you're doing something wrong as a group. So there's better solutions than evasion, which is kind of strange because this has been a core piece. I'm not saying you must not take this, I'm just saying it doesn't give us a lot of value. So that's the basic breakdown for some of the utility pieces. The reason we don't take Subterfuge is it doesn't buff our Shadow Strike. So after you hit your initial Shadow Strike from Stealth, the 3 seconds after Stealth are not granting your Shadow Strike its extra damage bonus. So Subterfuge is pretty useful for some of the other specs because you can get more Garotso out, and Outlaw Rogue has access to a lot of its other abilities to do CC from Stealth. But Sub Rogue actually doesn't gain a lot of extra value since we're going to be in Shadow Dance so often. We have access to all of our cheap shots and other tools from Stealth, and we don't really need Subterfuge. You'll notice also we aren't really taking a second charge of Shadow Dance, and that seems kind of crazy given that Sub is built around Shadow Dance. And the truth is that if we go down this route, we pick up a couple of items that are not quite as helpful. Now, Soothing Darkness is pretty decent in Mythic Plus, but Fine Weakness is the main weak point, ironically, of this portion of the tree. Both in single target and in AoE, due to the way our kit works, we are going to be Gloom Blading or backstabbing often enough, and we're going to be Shuriken Storming often enough to apply Fine Weakness to all the targets that we're dealing with. So there's almost 100% uptime within the kit without taking Fine Weakness on the class side. So this is basically a set of dead talents. Once we get our tier set, two Shadow Dances will probably go up in value because we get a bit more out of being in Shadow Dance all the time. But as you'll see in the footage, our basic AoE rotation gets us back to Shadow Dance very quickly. And more than that, we get to pick up tools like Cold Blood and modify our gameplay with Thistletea. Seal Fate is excellent. Lethality is excellent. Having access to more versatility is also excellent. These pieces just surpass the value of an extra charge of Shadow Dance at present. On the spec side, Without a Trace is probably a little bit more damage overall since we can get access to more slice and dice uptime. We can get bigger Shadow Strike damage, and after you have done the combo of Secret Technique and Cold Blood, you can you can vanish into Shadow Strike to use up that crit buff with a really high value ability. But I would recommend thinking about Fade to Nothing. Cloaked in Shadows I've tried a bit, but I don't think it's that good. But maybe it will be good in lower content in general. But just having access to more movement speed especially, and having access to 10% DR while you're in Stealth and Shadow Dance is a lot of extra survivability for Rogue. So I think it's probably a little better than the extra Vanish charge. That's the main breakdown for the talent trees. Let me just pull up for you the footage, and I'll talk to you a little bit about openers and about Mythic Plus in general. You can see here we have the 5 target dummies. I do have Algathar's Trinket, which is a little awkward for us because this trinket has a channel time, so it will pull you out of stealth if you want to use this trinket, but it does give you an insane amount of mastery. And you can see here I'm in like 365 gear, and we're pulling a lot of DPS on 5 targets. This is something that before I had really learned Sub Rogue, I was doing around 100k 20 eye levels from now, up around the 390s during beta testing. But just having optimized it and learned how to play it a little bit better, you can see some of the value here. So Algathar's Trinket is excellent. You do need to be mindful that you'll probably be using a Vanish charge if you're not prepping yourself correctly for bosses or for trash packs. But it's excellent. It's nice in both circumstances, frankly. If you're doing your regular pulls and then you get to a boss, you can usually have time to set up with casting your trinket, getting back into cloak, and opening with Shadow Strike. But the basic strategy is as follows for our AoE rotation. And you'll see it here, it'll loop back around. We have 2 priorities. 1, do we have Shadow Dance and Secret Technique available? Yes or no? If not, we're doing our rotation to get back to Shadow Dance, which is largely just filling with Shuriken Storm and Rupture Cleave if targets are going to survive, and then otherwise Shuriken Storm and Black Powder. So that's a very basic rotation back and forth. Then once we have Shadow Dance back, we're going to do a set of combos to give us a really high damage secret technique. So while we have Tornado, my suggestion is to press Tornado first and then press Dance. So we get in there to get our Slice and Dice up. We put Rupture on targets to clear our stacks. Then we use up our CDs, our Symbols of Death, and our Blades. And then we're going to press Tornado and immediately press Shadow Dance. And what that'll do is that'll start the process of Tornado and will fill within the window of Shadow Dance all of those spenders. And you can see in the right of my UI, I'm tracking for you the Dance Macabre stacks that I'd like to use up before I press Secret Technique. So it's something like Tornado's going off, you do a Rupture, you do Black Powder, you do a Black Powder again. You could throw in like another Shadow Strike there, depending on the number of targets, to give you another stack of Dance Macabre. But you want to get to 4 or 5 stacks very consistently in your gameplay. And then you're going to press Secret Technique before Shadow Dance is over. You're going to press Cold Blood after Secret Technique. And you'll see I have a little weak over here to remind me to wait. It shows up right in the center of my character. It'll go off in a second here. And I don't want to press any abilities until that Shadow Clone damage has occurred. And the reason for that is we retain the Cold Blood buff for the next ability after Secret Technique has happened. So we're sort of cheating. We're getting the Cold Blood buff for the Shadow Clone damage, and it always crits. You'll see in the opener just huge damage with my Mastery Trinket, everything critting. And then we get to use that Cold Blood up on the next ability, which is why in single target we suggest using Vanish Shadow Strike to make sure that that Shadow Strike also crits huge damage. But in AoE in general, you can just fire off another Shuriken Storm, whatever you need to do. So again, you'll see I have Puzzle. I'm opening and getting my CDs up. Then I go Tornado into Shadow Dance. We're getting stacks here. And then we're going to use them up on Secret Technique. I press Cold Blood, and you see all of the crits that happen right there. Okay. In general, in AoE, we're likely to have less Dance Macabre stacks overall, because especially in large numbers of targets, it's just worth more to press lots of Black Powder after the Secret Technique moment. The main thing I want to communicate to you guys is don't screw up your Secret Technique timing with Cold Blood. You can have less Dance Macabre stacks. Make sure your Secret Technique occurs within Shadow Dance. Here I'm going again. We got our stacks up. I'm going to see we have 3 seconds left. We have to get it off before the timer. You'll notice in that moment, my Secret Technique clones did not hit before the Dance Macabre stacks fell off. So that's the thing, is you have this 8 GCD window to get everything off. Don't cheat. Better to use Dance Macabre a little earlier and make sure that it lines up within the window and you get the big crits. Okay? Other considerations. Positioning. Positioning is a huge deal in Mythic Plus. Being able to get out of swirlies all the time, to find targets that you need to lock down with kidneys or gouges, especially gouge because you have to be in front of the target, so knowing where targets are facing is important. All of this you can do very cleanly outside of your rotation, meaning you can be pressing Shuriken Storm into Black Powder over and over and over again, and just spending your time looking at how the pull is developing. Who needs to get CC'd? Who needs to get kicked? Is there a mob over here that needs to be blinded? All of these things are very available for you because the rotation is nice and clean. So if you get down your Secret Technique timing and build that habit, you are suddenly full-time CC bot while you're doing your damage. You can just control almost everything. Kidneying them. If you're in Shadow Dance, you can even toss a cheap shot out, because you'll have the rotation down of how many buttons you want to press before it goes off. So it's a lovely playstyle for having that consistent ability to lock down targets while your AoE rotation is going on. That's the basic idea. The last thing I'd like to mention is your UI considerations. So you can see here, I'm using a combination of weak auras and tell me when. I have everything centralized around my character, and I would suggest the same thing for you. It doesn't need to be this cluttered in front of your character. You have your own preferences. But try to keep your information in the center of the screen. What are the main things that you want to know? First of all, Shadow Dance. Second of all, Secret Technique. Third, Cold Blood. Those are the most important things to track for your character. I'm obviously tracking a number of other pieces, whether it's CDs like Vanish and my personal defenses like Cloak and that kind of stuff, and also Thistle Tea. But most of that is irrelevant. The main thing that you want to be tracking is your Secret Technique and Dance, because that's the core piece of your damage profile in Mythic Plus. Frankly, in single target, it's also exceptionally important. You must have a good sense of when those are ready so that you can time your playstyle around it. Other than that, guys, I hope you're enjoying Rogue, because it is a blast to play right now in Mythic Plus. It does a lot of damage, first of all. It's nice and clean. Obviously, there's this special complication with Secret Technique and Cold Blood to get used to and to learn how to do well. But that just gives you some ceiling as a player. I love how engaged I can be from pull to pull. I like that you can contribute by sapping, by getting your allies through an area with Cloak, or with Shroud of Concealment. I like that you can make use of things like Shiv, like Brackenhide, or to get enrage effects off. The whole suite is there, and I hope this guide helps you to think through how to do your rotation well so that it's second nature, so that you can go into a pack and be prepared to deal with all the eventualities. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them in the comments below. Take care.